Welcome back to Secret Weapons, and today we're taking a look at the Halberd by Electronic Audio Experiments. Look, I know, we're back again talking about yet another Electronic Audio Experiments dirt pedal, but in my defense, we wouldn't be doing this so frequently if John Snyder would ever miss. But alas, he refuses to, and so we will keep covering these pedals. John Snyder at Electronic Audio Experiments, by the way, is quietly the most talented person in this industry. You will see his fingerprints on circuits from all of your favorite builders if you look closely enough, but we're not getting into that today. Today, we're just talking about his core lineup, and specifically, we're talking about Halberd. What happens when John at Electronic Audio Experiments makes a transparent overdrive. And I like starting it like that because the concept of a transparent drive is not something that anybody would really associate with the EAE line. And also because it is technically true under very specific circumstances. If you have that voice control in the middle position, which I guess you would call default, your pre and your post pretty much at noon, and your tone and your depth correctly at noon, you will get basically transparent overdrive out of this. You will get your guitar tone, but more, and with some clipping. As you turn up that pre, you will increase that clipping. As you increase or decrease that post control, you will increase and decrease the overall totally flat response of all that stuff, volume into your amplifier. But it will feel very, very even in a very reliable way, which is fascinating. But in this pedal, all of that is effectively just establishing a baseline for what you really should be doing with this pedal, which is using the incredibly powerful EQ section and that incredibly versatile pre-post combination to almost craft your ideal overdrive sound inside one pedal. Because this is, for my money, the most versatile pedal that Electronic Audio Experiments makes. That pre-post combination gives you a wealth of different kind of clipping and volume balancing act options. That tone and depth control is shockingly robust. You have a low shelf and a high shelf that will boost and cut your frequencies in a very, very forceful way, but in a very, very well balanced way at all times. That tone control, which is basically your high shelf, will give you clarity, articulation, and kind of bring the note definition that this thing already has closer and closer to the forefront of your sound, while that depth control is basically a pre-gain low shelf that I like to joke is effectively like being able to blend a Marshall 4x12 into your guitar signal. And that's not for nothing. In the sound samples, you'll hear me reference that and kind of play around with that idea. As you turn up that depth control, it really does feel like you are bringing in this like looming, larger than the planet you are standing on sense of low end into your guitar tone. It will take any guitar you've got and kind of any amp you've got and just make it sound comically big if you want it to. And if you take it even further, really, really doomy, which can be really fun. In that center voice control, you effectively can max out that pre-gain control and get like a really good, thick mid-range or like mid-gain overdrive, kind of like not super high gain. You can then take that post control, which has a ton of volume on tap, and blow up your amp with it. However, that voice control in the center allows you to deviate off of that totally flat baseline response rate you've got and take it up into what I think they call clang mode, which is going to be added treble, reduced bass from kind of a baseline, or down into the lower one, which is like basically the inverse of that. It's like all the heft of the low end with less treble as a baseline. And when you have a really powerful two-band EQ like you have in this thing, you might ask why you would bother including that. But I think it's because, one, that added kind of like EQ stage in that clipping thing basically increases the baseline amount of drive you are getting out of this thing. If you max that pre out in the center position, like I said, you get this nice woody sounding, even mid-gain overdrive. If you're in the up or down positions, your baseline starts with a lot more drive and a lot more EQ character that you can then further tailor with those lows and highs. It really lets you kind of take this pedal, establish whatever baseline you want, and then fine tune it from there. How much of that giant wall of sound low end do you want? How much bite and clarity and grit do you want in the top end of your guitar? This really is, for being 4 knobs and 1 switch, a comically versatile pedal. And you heard it on that intro. We use this on everything. Those chuggy palm muted verse riffs, Halberd, depth down. Those lead parts, turn that depth back up to kind of thicken them up a little bit. The really sparkly clean stuff is actually voiced in that down position, that bassier setting, but with that depth cut and that tone pushed. And you can get some amazing, beautiful clean tones out of this, like truly sparkly stuff out of something that, again, bass lines at a nice kind of like thick, flat overdrive sound. I often feel like I'm bad at talking about overdrive, so we're gonna stop doing this right now. We're gonna go ahead and jump into our sound samples and really kind of explore the feature set on this thing, because I think it's something really impressive and maybe one of the most nuanced and inventive things John has done at EAE, largely because the bass line is so unassuming and it can take you almost anywhere, from clean, articulate, sparkle drive stuff all the way up to like doomy fuzz into fuzz into fuzz levels of Kane. So let's give it a listen. This is my Balaguer Ambient Select Espada semi-hollow guitar. It has evergreen humbuckers. They're like low-line vintage voice PAF style humbuckers with a coil tap. We're gonna be using this for all of our sound samples, and the reason for that is this has as a bass line a very mellow, kind of low-mid focused guitar sound. It's very warm and bassy in a very comfortable way, but doesn't bassline as a very articulate, super bright, chimey guitar. And so I think it's a great spot to start to kind of be able to showcase both how you can take the core sound of a very specific sound of pickup and accentuate it very flatly with the Halberd, or really foundationally change the character of your guitar and the amps you're working in. So let's go ahead and get into our sound samples. So let's talk through our pedal board really quick. We're not going to touch most of this because the Halberd is such a great standalone piece of gear, but we are, for context, using the Bondi 2026 compressor, the Benson Germanium Boost, the 1981 Inventions DRV, the Bondi Sick As, into the EAE Halberd. From there, we go to our Strymon Timeline, Bigsky, and Flint in stereo, and then out to our amplifiers, which are stereo, parallel, the Ruby and Dream, being kept kind of like being blended together with the GFI Duophony. For the purposes of most of these sound samples, we're going to be using the Flint with a pretty subtle 70s plate reverb and no other real effects going on. This is what that sounds like. So we'll start by just kind of really quickly jumping through the three voicing options in this middle toggle. But as we kind of really dig into post, pre, tone, and depth in terms of getting our understanding of what this pedal does, we're going to stay in that middle position. And then we will jump back up to that up and that down toggle positions to kind of explore the parameters within those contexts as well. But that middle position being the most flat, the most transparent, if you can say that anything in this thing is uniquely transparent. That'll be the kind of like easiest place for us to get a handle on what our four kind of primary controls do. So let's dig into the Halberd. Again, here's our clean. And kind of an all knobs at noon. This is our kind of standard middle position voicing. And then the top position is going to be what EAE calls clang. You're going to know why in a second. And it's worth noting that both the upper and the lower voicing positions have intrinsically more gain in them. So you can hear clang. It's a lot more angular, a lot more jangly. And then the down position is going to be deep, and that's going to be much bassier. we'll come back around to those. So let's start things out by taking a look at that pre-control. That's going to be kind of your input level, kind of gain going into the clipping modes on this thing. Lower settings, you're going to get a little bit of compression, and then you'll get more clipping as you turn it up. Pretty much like a medium overdrive kind of thing. You'll get a lot of volume and a lot of additional gain out of that post-control. But let's give that pre-gain a listen. Obviously with no gain. So in this middle position, like I said, it also is kind of the lower gain of the three modes, mostly because it's not pushing all that extra treble or bass into your clipping stages and everything. You get kind of like a medium to medium high amount of overdrive with that totally like dimed out like that. A nice thick, really kind of like woolly, if woolly applied not to fuzzes, which I really like. I think the thing that's worth knowing is, even before we dive into these lower controls, which are going to be very important in crafting the exact kind of overdrive you want in this thing, even here with that totally maxed out, you get a lot of really great note articulation. That's a great like medium overdrive, even apropos of nothing else in this pedal. And then that post control is going to be your kind of like overall output of the pedal. And it's going to hold pretty steady, which is great. So you can kind of get everything else dialed and then just set your overall output. But this thing gets loud as hell. So you can also use it to blow the crap out of your amplifier, which is really fun. That's where you really start to kind of like warm up the tubes, or in my case, the kind of pretend tubes in the Universal Audio amplifiers. But you know, you can take that kind of that pre-control a little bit lower, kind of a nice gentle overdrive. Yeah, that thing puts out a lot of volume and can really, really mangle your amplifier in a really fun way. So let's get into what I consider to be the kind of like high value meat of this pedal right here, which is going to be those tone and depth controls. Because like I said, especially in this middle voicing position, everything feels very your tone with more clipping. And again, we picked this this Balaguer for this part of the video because it has that really mellow humbucker, low wind, vintage voiced thing. And these two controls, this depth and tone, will actually do a ton to shape this thing and take it from being like an incredibly transparent sounding drive, especially again in this middle position here, into exactly what you need it to be. This depth control is going to be an adjustable low frequency shelving filter. And what it does is increases and decreases your low end response, but in a way that also is ahead of like a lot of the gain staging in this thing, a lot of the clipping. So you will get really a lot of clarity and less low end. And as you turn it up, rather than just feeling like you're getting more low end, you're actually kind of blowing out the low end too as you go, which creates a really, really interesting kind of from a super sharp clarity thing all the way out to like really woolly, kind of almost fuzzy tones, which is really cool. So it changes character in a very meaningful way. And similarly, that tone control is going to be a kind of like high shelf. If you take it down all the way, you'll actually get a little bit of a bass boost, which is an interesting consequence of that tone control. But it is also kind of where you're going to get all of your clarity and all of your bite and kind of all the teeth from an overdrive sound. But again, the beauty here is how interactive these two controls are. So in this scenario, you'd kind of like, you can do something like roll that tone back a little bit, boost that low end, and get like a really heavy, sludgy. Fuzzy, bassy, sludgy stuff, or go the exact opposite direction. Cut that depth a little bit, and really get something. That depth control just, it imparts so much character as you move through it, which is really interesting. I often joke when I talk about this pedal with friends of mine and stuff, that the depth control feels like blending a Marshall 4x12 into your sound. Like you take it down lower, because again, we're going into like a Ruby and a Dream. We're going into like Fender and Vox style amplifiers. And that sounds like it right there. But as that depth comes up, you feel like you're getting that wall of noise heaviness of like a big open back 4x12. Let's take everything back to noon-ish and jump up to that clang. Here, kind of its core, kind of trebly, crazy personality, and then figure out how I like to tame it. So again, if we talk about that middle position on that voice being very, very transparent and kind of a flat response, this is not. So let's roll that treble back a little bit. I think the value of the up and down positions in the voice control are a starting line that's farther ahead on a more kind of like angular or colored tone, which allows you to kind of use those tone and depth controls to, rather than taking a flat response and imparting character into it, rather taking a highly characterized overdrive and fine tuning it either more or less towards an extreme. Because, I mean, that's pretty ice picky right there. But if you jump down to that other voice, all of a sudden this is like very useful. Yeah, this is where you get from Halberd is a medium gain overdrive into Halberd is basically a wall of sound. It's So let's go ahead and wrap things up by taking a look at what I think is my favorite voicing mode on the Halberd, which is going to be that lower toggle voicing mode. I think that because the tone boosts in such a way that I really like, and that the depth cuts in such a way that I really like, starting out with the voice set to be a lot bassier and a lot more low focused, both gives me more gain on tap without having to kind of increase that pre a ton, and also lets me kind of shape my treble and my bass response in the pedal differently than I would in the flat mode, which I think is interesting because I think the bass and the treble both are cut and boosted in a different character in this voicing mode than they would be by just turning the knobs on the pedal. That may not be true, but it's how it feels when I play it. So this is going to be, as you can tell, gainier and bassier than our middle position. And so what I love here is the ability to kind of add a little bit of bite. And then take that kind of like soft low end and really kind of cut it back a little bit and create something pretty focused and pretty sharp. This mode I also really like using that post control to really blow my amps up. Take it to like a really sharp, get it a little ice picky if you want. This thing gets really high gain in some of these settings. Start to kind of roll that depth back in to give it a little bit of warmth, but also as you push it, some really truly doomy guitar tones. The cool thing is even in this mode, you can kind of dial all this stuff to be a little bit cleaner and get some great note articulation out of this still. mean, it's pretty sparkly. I mean, there's some like really, really good ambient tones to be found in there. Let's take a look at that. We've coil tapped the Balaguer. Let's jump back to that middle position again, that nice flat response. We've added a lot more delay and reverb to our sound, and we're in our neck position with the coils tapped, so we're in single coil mode. So for this sound, I think what we would want to do is bring that pre down, give it a little more juice, and really kind of cut those lows, add a lot of that clarity back in.